Usually, I don't discuss my personal tastes on this channel. I mainly talk about the top 5 team leaders, previous legendary rivalries where I tell you in the most seductive way possible, welcome, that's how you are. Anyway, this introduction I'm doing is just an excuse to do something I did back in 2019, taking advantage of the fact that there's no Formula 1 and, at least at this moment, I don't have many more topics to talk about. It's about telling you about 7 car brands or manufacturers that I would love to see in Formula 1, where some of the ones I'm going to mention have already had brief appearances in the category, others haven't even been there as a joke, but seeing them would be a dream come true for me. So, in honor of the old Skyline Racing from 2019 who was 24 years old, had a great body and weighed 10 kilos less, we're going to do this little remake of one of our first videos. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the top 7 manufacturers I would like to see in Formula 1. The brand that takes the 7th spot on this list is an American one, perhaps the most important American car manufacturer in the world, which was a pioneer in many aspects of the automotive industry. And it has plenty of experience in the world of motorsports. Ladies and gentlemen, in 7th place we have the American manufacturer Ford, the creator of cars like the Mustang, the Gran Turismo, 40, the Thunderbird, and a long list of other vehicles that this automaker has produced, ranging from utility trucks, sports vehicles, and cars. Obviously, cars that have competed in the highest categories of the motorsport world. And yes, I know what many of you are going to write in the comments. Ford is already in Formula 1, they returned with Red Bull, they're their engine suppliers, and yes, you're right, but at the same time, not really. The collaboration that Ford currently has with Red Bull is not much more than sponsorship and technical support since the engines were built by Red Bull. And Ford only put their stamp and name on these power units, which were designed by the energy drink brand, in addition to contributing some of their knowledge, which is how they actually returned to Formula 1, but in a very timid way. And to give context to this video, I'll tell you a little more about the history of Ford in Formula 1. The automotive giant is no stranger to the world of the top tier of motorsport, since they've been involved in Formula 1 since 1967 and most of their history has been as engine suppliers. And they had an unsuccessful attempt to have their own racing team in the 1960s, thanks to their partnership with the engine supplier. It was thanks to their partnership with Cosworth that they began building racing engines, which officially debuted in Formula 1 in 1967. Basically, Cosworth made the engines, Ford financed them, and that's how this lucrative partnership was born, with Cosworth being a Ford company. And, interestingly, in the debut of this partnership, they also achieved their first victory in Formula 1 thanks to Jim Clark from Lotus at the 1967 Dutch Grand Prix. From this race on, Ford would continue supplying engines, and their first championships would come in 1968 with the achievement of both the drivers' and constructors' titles, marking a methodical start in Formula 1 where they quickly became a benchmark. At least during the first years, because once the turbo engine era arrived, Ford and Cosworth were somewhat sidelined with their work, but even so, they still managed to achieve a lot of success. And in particular, the last one they achieved. In the top category of motorsport, it was the achievement of the World Drivers' title with Michael Schumacher and Benetton in 1994. However, Ford made an attempt to have their own team when in the year 2000 they bought Stewart's competitive structure, to name it Jaguar Racing since Jaguar was one of their subsidiary brands at that time. They entered Formula 1, yes, but under the representation of the Jaguar Sports brand. So this was Ford's official team in Formula 1, which never managed to achieve success and ended up disappearing from Formula 1 by 2004 as a result of inefficient management. And after selling the team to Red Bull, Ford disappeared from Formula 1, although Cosworth continued supplying engines to some teams until it also disappeared from Formula 1. In 2014, when the hybrid power units arrived in the category, and throughout its entire history in Formula 1, they achieved, in 528 races they competed in, 176 victories, 533 podiums, 10 Constructors' Championships, and 13 Drivers' Championships in Formula 1. So, historically speaking, Ford is one of the most successful engine manufacturers in Formula 1 thanks to its partnership with Cosworth. And in 2026, after several years of absence, the American brand will return to Formula 1 alongside Red Bull Racing, but far from doing it themselves, creating their own engine or having their own team. Their involvement is limited to putting their sticker on the name of the power unit and collaborating with the energy recovery systems. So, in reality, it's more of a sponsorship deal than a technical collaboration. So you'll understand why I include them in this top list. It's simply because I personally would love to see them as an independent team and not just as sponsors of Red Bull's power unit. Ford has an incredible legacy in motorsports. not only with their multiple victories in Formula One, but also with many successes achieved in different categories. Engines around the world, for example, in endurance races. Ford has victories in the 24 Hours of Le Mans and was part of one of the greatest rivalries in the history of motorsports. They have been key players in the World Rally Championship, multiple-time champions, and have a rich legacy in National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, the top category in the United States. So in itself, and since Ford is one of my favorite car brands, I would like their participation to be complete. And even though it's impossible, at least for now, for them to be encouraged to enter Formula One if the collaboration with Red Bull turns out to be a success or a new style of power units is adopted, for example, what's being proposed with combustion engines but using biofuels. Could it be that Ford is considering a return as a full team? They haven't asked me, but my dream personally is that they end up buying Racing Bulls and make it their official factory team, but honestly, I doubt that will ever happen, even in the long term. But anyway, in 7th place we have the American brand Ford. Right now, since there's no Formula One, I'm having a great time with the Winter Olympics. I love curling, luge, and especially, I'm a huge fan of figure skating on ice. And as Latin Americans, we have the option to watch it completely free on YouTube through Claro's platforms, and that way we avoid paying for any extra subscriptions. And on YouTube and the internet, there are a lot of sports or movies that are available to watch live, but they're not available in your country. And that forces us to subscribe to different streaming services. But fortunately, in this world, there are tools that help break those regional blocks. And if you also want to take advantage of that and not pay for 70,000 subscriptions, you have a way to do it with the tool from our friends at Surfshark. The tool in question is the VPN, or Virtual Private Network, which allows you to virtually place yourself in any region of the planet. With that, for example, if you're from here, from Mexico, and you want to watch Formula One on Disney+, all you have to do is open Surfshark, change your IP from Mexico to Argentina, and in a matter of seconds. With your same Disney+ subscription, you'll be able to access Formula One completely legally and without having to pay for another subscription online. And this little trick to unlock content also works to watch movies or series that aren't available in Mexico, or on some platform like Netflix, Amazon, Homebox Office, or some sports that are broadcast live through YouTube. Blocked for your region? But even on some travel websites, it's possible to find better prices if you access the same site but with a different location. So this function to change your IP has many uses, both for unlocking regionally blocked content, finding deals on different platforms, or protecting your cybersecurity, hiding your real IP to avoid scares with your personal information. And what if you also want to have all those advantages at hand or protect yourself from someone getting your credit card information? If you go to searcher.com/Skyline and use my code Skyline, you'll get 4 extra months when you sign up for the service. So you can try it on an unlimited number of devices. Try all its benefits for 30 days, and if you're not convinced or you don't like it, you have a full money-back guarantee. So I invite you to dive fully into VPNs and discover all the benefits of having one at hand. Thanks to our friends at Surfshark. If there's a brand that exudes elegance and speed, it's one that comes from Italy and holds the 6th spot in our ranking. It was founded in 1914, it's one of the best luxury car manufacturers in the world, and its founder was named Alfieri, Maserati. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Maserati Società per Azioni is a company of the Fiat Group, which has some of the most beautiful cars I've ever seen in my life, like the Gran Turismo, the Type 61, the Quattroporte, and my personal favorite, the MC20. But Maserati is not only known for its beautiful cars, but also for a historic legacy in Formula One, which includes 2 world championships. And when Formula One was born back in the 1950s, Maserati was one of the first manufacturers to enter with an official car. And from the very beginning, they were competing with other Italian brands, such as Ferrari and Alfa Romeo. And just 4 years after the birth of Formula One in 1954, they won the Drivers' Championship of the Grand Circus, which they repeated in 1957. Both drivers' titles led by the Italian brand were won by the Argentine Juan Manuel Fangio. However, despite the success they achieved, they ended up leaving Formula One at the end of the 1950s due to financial problems and the lack of interest from the Italian government in supporting Maserati's sports projects. And although in 1960 they supplied engines to the Cooper team and some small teams. And despite having 2 third-place finishes in the Constructors' Championships of 1966 and 1967, they ended up leaving the world of Formula One for good. Recently, for some time now, and more specifically in 2022, Maserati returned to motorsport by participating in the Formula E World Championship, the electric single-seater category. This marked the return of the Italian brand to competitions of this kind. For the first time in 65 years, achieving along the way 3 victories and 7 podiums in the 27 races they competed in. And I say they competed because their participation in this series ended in 2025 when they decided to leave the category after selling the team to Citroën and disappearing from the competitive scene. Maserati has always been a brand that stands out for its beautiful cars, thanks to their impressive aesthetics and their legacy in the automotive industry. But perhaps out of my entire list of fantasies from this list materialized in aerodynamic cars that reach 350 km per hour. This is one of those that would struggle most to make it to Formula 1. Mainly because the Fiat Group already has Ferrari as its flagship in the top category, and the last time this group tried to bring a second subsidiary brand to Formula 1, it was when they sponsored the Sauber team, naming it Alfa Romeo, in a partnership that didn't turn out as they expected, so I doubt the Fiat Group would want to invest in a second team. And at most, the situation would be very similar to what we saw with Sauber and Alfa Romeo, just putting the sponsorship but not actually coming in to run a whole team. But even so, I doubt something similar will happen anytime soon. There hasn't been any talk of the Fiat Group being interested in having a collaborative relationship again. Probably even less so. They would dare to build a second team from scratch. So as much as I would like it, I doubt that Maserati will see its name in Formula 1 again, at least in the near future. But as one of my favorite brands, it takes the 6th spot in our ranking, particularly among car brands I would love to see in Formula 1. Toyota, which holds the number 5 spot in our ranking, is a giant. A Japanese company, one of the largest car manufacturers in the world, which not only has a presence in thousands of markets around the globe, but also a rich culture within the world of motorsports. Ladies and gentlemen, the company we are referring to was founded in 1938 by Kichiro Toyoda, and its name is Toyota Motor Corporation. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Toyota is a brand that I particularly admire, from that era when tuning was in fashion. That was the time when souping up your car as much as you could was the law of the street, and when putting a rear spoiler on your Suru was absolutely necessary to keep it glued to the ground. And me, being a fan of many video games and movies that revolved around tuning, it made me fall in love with cars like the Supra, the Corolla, or the Celica, quickly becoming one of my favorite brands since I was very young. But also, Toyota has a rich culture within motorsports full of success. They've won championships several times in the World Rally Championship, National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing World Endurance Championship, and other global competitions. So they have racing DNA, and of course they have a history in Formula 1, a regrettable and heartbreaking story that we are going to tell you in a very summarized way. Toyota entered Formula 1 in 2002 with the intention of using the top category of motorsport as a great global showcase. To do this, they created a team completely from scratch and injected obscene amounts of money into it, thinking this was the fastest way to achieve success in Formula 1. But each year, Toyota saw their investments weren't producing results. Between extremely slow management, terrible bureaucracy from the headquarters of the giant automaker, and a complete lack of self-criticism when things went wrong, Toyota spent 8 seasons in the Grand Circle, and all they managed to achieve during all those years were 13 miserable points. Podiums, which yes, any team, especially if you ask Haas, would envy those 13 podiums in 8 seasons. But taking into account the millions of dollars burned and the astronomical investments they made, this definitely can't be seen as anything less than a failure. And in the end, since Toyota had already spent a lot of money and didn't want to risk their brand's prestige any further, their numbers ended up at only 140 Grands Prix competed, 13 podiums, and not a single victory in Formula 1. Because of the lack of success, the 2008 financial crisis and previous factors we've mentioned, these ultimately led to the disappearance of... Yes, if you're wondering, the story of Toyota is perhaps the biggest failure in Formula 1 considering the level of investment that was made in this team. A story that in fact we've covered in much more detail in Volume 2 of Automotive Brands That Failed in Formula 1. However, despite all these years after they stayed out of Formula 1, the Japanese brand never gave a clear start. That they wanted to return or that they were interested in coming back to Formula 1, the story suddenly took a 180-degree turn starting in 2024. And at the end of that season, Toyota announced a technical collaboration with the Haas team, where they benefit from the Formula 1 team. At the same time, Toyota provides technical support and access to its various tools, a partnership that has grown stronger over time and where by 2026, Toyota has become the main sponsor of the American team. It looks as if they are making a quiet comeback step by step to the top category of motorsport, so allow me to surprise you. But seeing how Toyota has been gradually integrating into Formula 1 recently, who's to say that in a few years the Japanese giant won't decide to acquire the American team and resume its journey in the top circuit, return as a constructor, and thus clean up its image from those sad seasons at the beginning of the 2000s. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it would definitely be something I'd love to see again. Cars from this iconic brand, but fully involved in the world of Formula One. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the number 5 spot on our list, the Japanese giant Toyota. The number 4 spot on our list is synonymous with beauty and speed. It's a company that designs what many consider to be the most beautiful cars on the planet, headquartered in Stuttgart and founded in 1931 by Ferdinand Porsche. Ladies and gentlemen, Porsche is a world-renowned brand known for its sports and luxury cars, which are instantly recognizable. Well, few people haven't seen the stunning beauty of a 911 a Carrera, and my personal favorite, a Porsche 918 Spider. I'm sure we've all been completely mesmerized when we've seen one of these cars driving down the street or parked somewhere. And it's just that these cars are so beautiful that if Sabrina Carpenter were a car, she would definitely be one of these beauties. And not only do they have a high pedigree with their sports and luxury cars, but in motorsport they have a legacy full of it. Class 3 categories. As of October. In anatomy, in the period after Des Werder Affendeme, specifically in the 1960s. Thanks to a rule change that allowed Formula 2 cars to participate, the Stuttgart brand entered Formula 1 as an official team, but it was an extremely brief adventure because the German brand was spending a lot of money in the category, and they ended up withdrawing after a couple of seasons, having achieved only one victory at the 1962 French Grand Prix. Although they returned to the category in 1983 as engine suppliers for the team, McLaren, who wanted a new engine to compete against the other already established Formula 1 teams. They built a V6 turbo engine which they decided not to name after themselves because the company Techniques d'Avant-Garde ended up financing this project. And because Porsche also didn't want to put their name on those engines without knowing if they would work. So in the end, these engines ended up being named Techniques d'Avant-Garde, which turned out to be a big mistake. Because in 1984 and 1985, McLaren with these engines won both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships in Formula 1. But these were essentially the first and only championships that Porsche had in the top category of motorsport in this McLaren Techniques d'Avant-Garde Porsche partnership, and once McLaren switched to being powered by Honda in 1988, the partnership ended, and Porsche didn't go on to power other teams immediately. Instead, they temporarily withdrew from Formula 1 and returned in 1991. Powering the footwork team in what turned out to be a completely failed partnership because the engine they designed, the Porsche 3512, was heavy, unreliable, and slow, and that caused footwork to struggle at the back of the grid. So this partnership didn't even last half a season before the team decided to abandon these engines and switch to being powered by Cosworth. So after this spectacular failure, Porsche left Formula 1 and it has never been seen again in the top category of motorsport. And unfortunately, it's another one of those brands that seems unlikely to ever make it to Formula 1. Was there an attempt in 2022 to return to the top category when they tried to buy 50% of Red Bull's shares? Porsche was going to return to Formula 1 along with Audi since they were the companies that Volkswagen wanted to place in the Formula, the top category of motorsport, as its subsidiary brands. And according to what is known, there were extremely advanced talks for Porsche to go ahead with that 50% of Red Bull. At year's end, the deal fell through, reportedly because Red Bull refused to give up half their team. And in the end, the German brand was left with nothing, even though they had the project quite advanced, at least when it came to their intention to enter Formula 1. And even though they explored other alternatives, in the end, Volkswagen only entered Formula 1 with Audi and Porsche. Not only did they not enter Formula 1, but in recent years some of their motorsport programs have even disappeared. It seems unlikely that after the failed attempt and Volkswagen's restructuring, Porsche will get another chance to reach the top circuit soon. Does it feel like they missed their big chance by not entering under these technical regulations? Or at least that's how I feel. Well, now Volkswagen Group's priority will be for Audi to succeed as its own representative. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the number 4 spot of our top list, the company of Ferdinand Porsche. Unlike what we've seen before, the brand that's in the number 3 spot has never been in Formula 1. In fact, its history in motorsport isn't as rich as the rest of the brands we've seen here, but you're not going to lynch me for this, baby. This ranking is based on personal taste, and obviously I was going to include the brand that made my second favorite car, and the one after which this channel is named. Founded in 1933 by Yoshisuke Aikawa, Nissan takes the bronze in our ranking. The creator of beautiful cars like the Nissan Gran Turismo Racer and of course the Nissan Skyline. And really, how can we deny it, ladies and gentlemen? The Skyline is a beauty. Oh, and the car is also very nice. But let's move on with this story. As I mentioned before, Nissan has never participated in the world of Formula 1, but its history in motorsports has had great representatives. They have competed in the 24 hours, and at some point, they were in the International Motorsports Association. The Gran Turismo Car Championship and mainly its racing car division are cars of this style, Gran Turismo type cars. But their main program in motorsports right now? Undoubtedly, it is in Formula E, the electric single-seater car category, where this brand has been competing since 2019. Taking advantage of Renault leaving the competition to focus on Formula 1, and currently it's the only international competition where Nissan is present. And in this series, over all these years, they have achieved a driver's title in the 2024-2025 season won by the British driver Oliver Rowland. And if in the previous positions we mentioned that it was difficult to see the different automotive industries we talked about returning to Formula 1 in Nissan's case, it would look extremely complicated. They have never had a real interest in the top category. One of the brands they are already associated with, that is Renault, is already in Formula 1. And honestly, they have never been interested in testing themselves as engine suppliers, so thinking that this will change in the coming years seems extremely naive. Nissan seems to be happy with their Formula E program, and at least for now, they have no plans to expand more. Considering that in the 8 years they've been in Formula E, they've only managed to win one driver's championship. So just imagine the challenge it would be to go from a platform like Formula E to Formula 1 all of a sudden. Maybe if they start to become more relevant and successful in this electric category and the new Formula 1 engine regulations catch their attention, maybe they could consider it in the future, but at least for now, that idea seems extremely complicated. Even so, Nissan is one of my favorite brands. And the number 3 spot on this list goes to the Japanese automaker Nissan, the brand that holds the second place on this list. It's stunningly beautiful, being a company whose cars are known for their luxury, yes, but also for their speed. It's a German brand based in Munich whose name is Trensbergen, but it's better known as BMW. That's right, the Bavarian brand takes the silver in this ranking, a brand whose vehicles have always fascinated me. And if you know about my love for video games, you'll know that I'm in love with the M3 Gran Turismo racer from the legendary Need for Speed series. And all my life I've dreamed of having at least once a vehicle from this brand because I really like their cars. And fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, BMW does have a history in Formula racing that began in the 1960s, just like Porsche. They entered Formula 1 thanks to the rule change that allowed the use of Formula 2 type cars, where the German brand participated in some Grand Prix races occasionally. But starting in 1980, they would return to the category to get involved in a more formal and direct way, but now as engine suppliers. They created an engine that they named M1213, with which they would supply the world champion team Brabham starting in 1982. Characterized by being a very powerful engine, but at least in its early days, with serious reliability problems. Even so, despite this, that partnership ended up being a success. Because in 1983, Brabham and BMW won the driver's title that season, with the championship achieved by Nelson Piquet. But this, in itself, was their only glory within the big circus. Because after this, BMW was never able to achieve success again with the Brabham team, eventually withdrawing from Formula 1 in 1989 when turbocharged engines were banned. It wasn't until the year 2000 that they returned to Formula 1 to form an alliance with the Williams team, creating the legendary BMW Williams. This partnership lasted from the year 2000 until 2005, and although this partnership fought for the World Championship title in the 2003 season and achieved several victories along the way, the relationship ended badly when both sides began to blame each other for the lack of success. With Williams saying that their car was good but the engine was lacking, and with BMW responding, "No my friend, our engine is good, your cars are not up to the task." So just imagine Williams admitting that their cars weren't that good, or BMW admitting that their engines weren't all that great. Obviously, this created tension within the team, leading to their split where BMW decided to buy the Sauber team to start their adventure as a new constructor and independent team, thinking that this was exactly what they needed to finally succeed in Formula 1. So from 2006 to 2009 we saw the BMW era, but as an independent constructor. But things didn't improve at all. They were still behind their rivals, and they could only get one victory. In those 4 years, and after a failed rule change in 2009, they decided to withdraw from Formula 1. And up to now, they haven't returned to the top category of motorsport. And it hasn't been just once but several times that BMW has said they're not interested in coming back to the top category, that they don't need it, and that it's definitely not their priority. The last thing that, at least as far as I remember, was known about BMW with Formula 1, it was when McLaren approached them to be their power unit supplier, but that negotiation didn't go anywhere. BMW simply kept focusing on their other motorsport projects, like the one they currently have, in endurance categories where in fact the brand, Bavara said that he considers the World Endurance Championship, that is, the World Endurance Championship, to be technologically more interesting than Formula One, and above all, it requires a much lower level of investment. So, seeing this, it's one of those other manufacturers that really seems unlikely to enter Formula One. Unless this new technical regulation is a success and attracts the attention of different manufacturers around the world, otherwise I don't see it happening, at least not from my perspective. If BMW gets encouraged to return to the category, so I hope this engine regulation is a success, because that way, maybe it will be possible to see new brands in Formula One, and maybe with a bit of luck. This might be what ends up catching BMW's attention to return to the top tier of motorsport. So, ladies and gentlemen, second place in this ranking goes to Bayerisch Motor Innsbrucken, better known as BMW. If you're loyal followers of this channel, you'll know that my favorite car isn't the Nissan Skyline. If you're new here, plot twist. The Skyline is not my favorite car. That honor goes to what I consider the most aesthetically impressive car on the planet, and definitely my favorite car brand around the world. And why didn't I name this channel Aventador Racing? It's simple. The name just didn't sound good at all. Ladies and gentlemen, the brand I most want to see in Formula One, like a prayer, like a plea, is Italian, and its name is Lamborghini, the brand that was born from the dispute between Enzo Ferrari and His Majesty Ferruccio Elio Arturo Lamborghini, a designer of cars that are simply my obsession, like the Countach, the Miura, the Murcielago, the Huracan, and, as I've already made quite clear, my favorite of all, the Lamborghini Aventador. But unfortunately for me, Lamborghini is one of those brands that, despite being associated with super sports cars and ridiculously fast vehicles, they have never been 100% interested in motorsport, considering it unnecessary for them. So, they've never really had much interest in Formula One, and the only time they showed interest in the top category ended in a complete failure, because in 1989, with the ban on turbocharged engines, Lamborghini entered Formula One seeing it as a good opportunity to break into the category. They designed a 3.5-liter 12-cylinder engine that would be used by the Laris team, but its performance was never anything out of this world. By 1991, a Mexican businessman contacted them to create a Formula One team in collaboration with them. And the result was equally disappointing, because regardless of the fact that the Mexicans scammed them and disappeared off the face of the earth, Lamborghini ended up keeping the car. They sent it out on the track basically because they already had it ready, and there was no way they would let it just sit there without at least running it. But the adventure of this team, which ended up being called Team Modena, which as I told you was basically born because they had the engine and the car, ended up being a complete disaster. You might wonder why it was Team Modena and not Lamborghini Racing or Team Lamborghini. And basically it was because the Italian brand didn't want to risk the project being a failure. They wouldn't put their names on that team or engine without knowing they were on the right track. So they handled this smartly. This team barely lasted a year. They had extremely disappointing results, and in the end, Lamborghini withdrew from the project before their prestige was affected any further. The last thing heard about Lamborghini with Formula One was that they wanted to develop an engine for McLaren to use in 1994, but the British team rejected them. It was over. And this is where Lamborghini said, "To hell with it, I'm done with this." They withdrew from the world of Formula One for good, and to this day they haven't shown any intention of coming back, not even a real tangible interest. Besides, there's a big problem with Lamborghini, which is why I think it's practically impossible for the Italian brand to ever return to Formula One. And the thing is, in motorsport they're completely cursed. The projects they try never end up working out. Their time as engine suppliers failed, and their own Formula One team was a complete disaster. Recently, they also tried their luck in the World Endurance Championship. And the project didn't last long because the car was very uncompetitive, and they ended up withdrawing from endurance competitions as well. Without any notable success in their history, it's hard to believe this brand would try to return to Formula One, especially as they're owned by the Volkswagen Group. When has Volkswagen ever returned to Formula One? They didn't even consider this brand and focused exclusively on Audi and Porsche. So my dream of seeing cars from my favorite brand in Formula One will most likely probably remain just a dream for many more years. Just that, a dream. But well, this is basically a list of my dreams, or aguiros as they say in my hometown. So Lamborghini Automobili takes the gold in this list of manufacturers or car brands that I would love to see in Formula One. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our short video. This is where I ask you, which brands would you particularly like to see in the top category of motorsport? Write to me in the comments section all the brands you would like to see get involved in the top category at some point. Because believe me, I'm very interested to know what your personal preferences are. Leave all your opinions in the comments section because I'll be reading each and every one of you. But if you like this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you'll know when I'm uploading a new video, and share this with your friends as well. So I invite you to follow us on our Instagram and Twitter accounts, the links to which will be in the description of this video, and I'll see you soon. For more content on your Skyline Racing channel, thank you for tuning in. See you later.